We begin life as a blank canvas, every breath a new stroke of potential. From our very first steps, we start a journey of growth, learning, and searching. Through each stage, we take on roles. We learn, we fight, we build. We strive to find our place in the world. Yet for so many of us, there's a whisper, quiet but persistent. A question lingering at the edges of our thoughts. Is this all there is? Deep down, we sense something more, something bigger, a purpose uniquely ours. And when we begin to uncover it, everything changes. That purpose brings clarity. It transforms the mundane into the magical, the ordinary into the extraordinary. It adds depth to every experience and a radiant glow to everyday existence. Here on Transcendence, we explore that search for meaning. Together, we'll uncover the truths, tools, and paths that guide us toward the lives we were meant to live. Because when you find your purpose, you find yourself. Welcome to Transcendence. Welcome everybody to another episode of Transcendence with your host, Josh Rutledge, as well as Debs Shakti. Debs, how are you doing?
I'm doing great today, and it's a most excellent day in my life. How about you?
Any day that I wake up on this side of the earth is a great day.
Well, good enough.
I was talking to my kids on the way to school this morning, and I always ask them, hey, is there any, just questions that are out there that you want to ask that maybe I can help you answer or understand? And one of my daughters said, when is the end of the world going to be? And I said, well, it's going to be a long time from now, probably when the sun, expands and encompasses the earth. Mm-hmm. And she said, well, by then, humans will have either figured out how to get along, and we've probably spread to other planets, or we've killed each other off. And I said, yeah, probably that's about right. And so we were just kind of talking about how, this life is and how important this life is. And so it's one of the topics that I wanted to talk about with you is, like a lot of people think about reincarnation. And they think about it in the mentality of, well, if I don't get it right this time, I've got a do-over.
Yeah.
But, the way that I've come to understand time is that, in our present existence, we think about time as very linear. Mm-hmm. But outside of the physical world, time is not very linear. And so really all the lives that you ever have lived, are living or will live are all kind of happening simultaneously.
They are forever, all at once in the same place.
And so that mentality of, I don't have to put in the work, or I don't have to put in the effort because I can just do it over, really is a misleading mentality, because you're already doing it over somewhere else in some other lifetime.
Right. We're exploring, again, we're getting into beliefs, but from all of my explorations with quantum hypnosis, all those journeys, not just for myself, but with the thousands of people I've worked with, what I'm finding out is we live all lives. We don't just live all of our infinite lives, but we live all lives. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, you're going to be doing things different ways in each one of those, or in many of them. And I agree with you. It's there's no excuse from not making this one the best one you can,
Yeah.
Because they all refer as well. Mm-hmm. That's what I believe deja vus are, and synchronicities. They're just bleed through from some of the most impactful or energetically resonant lives that on this one and vice versa. So, and by the way, may I just say, what a great thing to do as a parent on the way to school, asking your children to ask a question. And your kids always, you've told me this before, some of these questions, your kids come up with some really amazing questions,
Yeah.
thought provoking.
I mean, I guess so they're both life path 33s.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm a life path 44. So I figure it's my job to try to encourage them and help them grow as much as possible. So
It's
not only
really,
as a parent, but just kind of as,
as a guide.
yeah.
Yeah, guardian. That's
So, well,
awesome.
thank you for that. I mean, I think sometimes they probably get annoyed with some of the questions or things I want to talk about, but
All kids get annoyed.
yeah,
But
exactly. But I was thinking about the whole idea of you mentioned it that we are living uh, all lives, and I want to make sure, like, I've read a few books by Dolores Cannon,
mhm,
and her books. If I know you've probably read one. For anybody who's listening or watching hasn't read
right.
one, they're traditionally a collection of all of the people who allowed their hypnosis sessions to be printed into the book.
Transcribed. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so, in the early days, they were like, before you had AI that could convert, audio into
Yeah.
text, it was someone writing all of the audio tapes that Dolores
Yeah.
captured over the
Taking
years.
dictation. And I think
Yeah.
she did it herself most of the time.
Wow. Wow.
As far as I know, she transcribed all of it herself because she wanted to make sure that
She got it
it came
right.
over exactly
Yeah.
the way it did.
And so,
Huge
in
effort.
some of her books, people talk about, well, I think when she first got started, she really was focused on past life regression, which, again, if you think about all life happening at the same moment, there's really no such thing as
Yeah.
past life or future life. But again, we put things through the lens of linear time.
Right.
But what she started to find is that people were reporting lives as extraterrestrials and
Hmm.
lives as clouds and rocks and rain and all these other things. And
Yep.
so you really have to expand, I think, what we label as life, right? Most people, if they pick up a rock, wouldn't think of that rock as having a life, but it does, and it has experiences throughout its lifetime. Its lifetime is long as well. I mean, millions
Hmm.
of years in some cases.
Long, slow moving, more focused on, what is around them. But you said most people don't, but I would underscore that by most non-indigenous people from non-indigenous cultures
Mhm.
don't get it. But most indigenous cultures, even now, still teach and practice that all things have consciousness,
Mhm.
including grains of sand, including the air. So, somewhere along the line, some of us, some of our ancestors, lost that
Yeah.
connection. I think it was programmed out of them, actually, because it's easier to control people, right, if they don't have
Yeah.
that belief.
I think it's really interesting too. I was thinking about this the other day about that whole idea of where we as a society kind of stopped being willing to believe in the things that our ancestors built. So many of the practices that we still follow today were based on the belief in those
Yeah.
kind of fringe element, life cycles. And so I really
Hmm.
I looked back, in our history, in our time, and really when it really started to change was around the Industrial Revolution.
Bingo. Yeah.
And I started thinking about, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but I've always heard that iron is toxic to things like fairies and gnomes and dwarves and
Hmm.
things like that. And
Yeah.
in the Industrial Revolution, we started working heavily with iron.
With
In fact,
steel.
our
Yeah.
bodies are mostly, we probably have been permeated with iron over the years.
Yeah.
So does that maybe put us in a position to be I guess, not open to those other realms because of the way
Yeah.
that we've worked with different minerals and things
Yeah.
over the last 100 years?
Think about this conductivity, right?
Hmm.
So, certain things conduct electricity better than others, for
Right.
instance. But we're talking about energy. And when you're talking about those other realms, usually they are a much higher vibrational state. When you talk about being exposed to, touching, even consuming, in your food, iron, which is a very, very dense
Yeah.
element,
Very heavy. Yeah.
very heavy, but it's also easily magnetized. So if you really want to go down the rabbit hole, you could say, I wonder if someone somewhere realized this and figured out how to energetically magnetize certain ideologies and beliefs that would kind of be attracted to the iron that we are surrounding ourselves with, i.e., being more stuck in the physical material world. And here's something that I found out a couple years ago, Josh. I've grown an organic garden all of my adult life, and I try to grow as much of my own food as I possibly can on the property that I have. But there were ancient practices that discovered if you make copper coils that go into the earth, wrapping it around even like a piece of wood or around a plant stalk, let it go into the earth like a grounding coil, and you have it go above where the plants are, it literally will attract more of the antioxidants, nutrients, and the positive, well, I don't know if it's positive or negative, the charge that they need to flourish. Well, it's called electroculture. Okay, so I experimented with it the last few years, and I have to tell you, the yields and the lack of pests and so forth in my garden were hundreds of percents different than they were without it. So different materials literally attract different things. So, we can talk about, yes, things were really bad, like in the Dark Ages even. But when people first started making tools from iron was when we started seeing more and more and more of the cultural change that. So yeah, once we hit the Industrial Revolution where we're working with iron, making steel, all of that, I think you're on the right track.
And it's really interesting too that I think sometimes we as people think that once we give something a name, that we've defined what that thing is. But that could be further than the truth, right?
It's such a human misconception.
Yeah.
And it's so human, isn't it, for us to want to categorize and label everything, which, if you bring it down to the lowest common denominator of thought, that's just causing divisiveness. It's causing separation. When you label something, you're saying that versus this, or that over there is not this. So it continuously is pulling us apart.
Talking about those different metals and copper, about maybe a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, I started wearing copper rings, one on each hand. And I've noticed that since doing so, I'm able to more easily keep my own vibration much higher.
Yeah.
And what I really found was I use dowsing rods a lot.
I was going to say the dowsing rods are copper, right?
And so my first experience with dowsing rods were actually with the handles were wood, but of course the rod was copper.
Yeah.
But the ones I have now have a copper sleeve, then the main copper rod sits inside of it so that it can turn freely regardless of how tight I hold. But what I noticed is when I used those, since they were both copper, I think created like a circuit between one in one hand and one in the other, with my body being the connecting energy that created that circuit. And so I thought, well, can I take that and translate it into not have to walk around with rods in my hands all the time?
Yes.
And so that's where I came up with the copper rings.
Yeah. And so you are able to link into the cosmic mind a lot better, or quantum field basically is what we're talking about. So when you think about this, probably the very first metal that humans worked into a tool or a vessel or anything was copper. And so and most of their jewelry was copper until they you know, discovered some of the other things. So I think you're onto something. And I wear copper every day. I have copper infused clothing, I have jewelry and stuff, but I hadn't thought about placing a ring of copper on each hand. And I think that's going to be some kind of fun technology I'm going to play with. Now, thank you so much for
Yeah,
the
you can
idea.
give that a shot and see.
We'll experiment with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really cool too because so this ring is handmade. It's Arizona copper,
Mm-hmm.
and then this one, the other one is from India, India copper. And so
Cool.
it's like two different parts of the world, that and
Awesome.
so it also helps me kind of stay connected to the earth.
Yeah.
Um,
Love it.
and it's really interesting too when you think about copper. Arizona is one of the largest copper sources in the world,
Yes.
and it's also one of the largest quartz locations in the
Yes.
world. And
Yeah.
then thinking about the relationship between quartz and copper,
Mm-hmm.
that's why you talking about the garden and kind of burying some copper. Wonder if you wrapped copper a coil around a quartz crystal and buried that in the ground.
I
Uh,
will have I will have to send you some photos of
okay.
my garden last year because I didn't put it in the ground, which is an interesting idea. The copper is in the ground, but at the top of the coil are small, it's wrapped around small quartz crystals. So, and it was phenomenal. I mean, and what I did too was I meditated with the materials before I put them in the garden. As we know, quartz crystal especially is highly programmable. So
Mhm.
I put my intentions into the quartz and into the copper and then did that. And I can't wait to expand on that idea, in the spring because it's really I've
Yeah.
been on fire about it. It's amazing.
There's we're gonna get outside of the topic
Yeah,
of
I know.
of,
Sorry.
of
We
reincarnation. No,
always
that's
do.
okay. I love the way our discussions go. But thinking about that, it's often been theorized, I think, that the Great Pyramid in Egypt was a power source, that it used some sort of thing to produce power that radiated from the top of it, when it originally had, I think, a gold kind of pyramid on
Had
top.
it. Yeah,
And it's
capstone.
also been asked, well, how did they harness that power that was being produced? My thought is obelisks. Obelisks
Mhm.
were basically sunk into the ground
Yeah.
so far, and they used the resonant vibration of the earth to
Hmm.
basically tune them to be able to connect the energy that was produced by the Great Pyramid.
Right. They were just like, you know, telephone poles,
Right.
basically, or electrical poles. But the other thing, too, to remember is I don't think they were just power sources. I think they harnessed power to do certain
Mhm.
things, right? Teleport, whatever,
Right.
but heal. But the materials themselves that those pyramids and obelisks are made of are highly infused with
Yes.
crystal.
With quartz and stuff. Yeah.
Right. That
Yeah.
stone is literally, infused with quartz crystal. And then we know that at the time, anyway, that there was water source underneath.
Hmm.
And so you have a conductivity of water and pressure.
Hmm.
They even, sometimes I think, some people postulate that there was also a mercury source. And utilizing
Yep.
those properties would create a power source like a Wi-Fi system.
Yep. That's actually, it came to me in a meditation one time. It came to
Mm-hmm.
me, the kind of the technology that was used in the Great Pyramid and how those were used obelisks. And so it actually, I came out of the meditation thinking I need to build a quartz obelisk in my backyard and sink it into the ground and just see
Yeah,
what
just to
happens.
see what happens.
Just
Yeah,
run a copper wire off of it into a little multimeter or something, and just see
yeah,
if it
just see
picks up
what it
some,
does.
see what it does.
Yeah,
And
you know, I
and that type of experimentation, I think, is really what's needed in order
well,
to
yeah.
to take us beyond this kind of hole of metal and structure
Hmm.
and everything that we fall into.
Petrochemicals.
Yeah, and get
Yeah,
back to, I think that's why so many times my guides and others, when you really start talking to and listening to your guides, most people, I think they would say, they tell them, get outside in nature. And it's
Absolutely.
because we sit in these structures in front of our computers all the time, and
We've
it just
lost our
lowers our
connection.
vibration. Yeah.
We've lost our connection. And I tell all of my clients, as part of their prescription, no matter what's going on with them, you must get outside and you must touch the earth
Hmm.
or the living parts that are coming off the earth. Like put your spine up against a tree. If
Yeah.
it's 20 below outside, 3 feet of snow, you're not going
Yeah.
to find any bare earth to put your feet on, but you can lean up against a
The
tree or
tree.
hug a
Yeah.
tree, right?
Or
But
just
yeah,
stand with your arms open and let
exactly.
the
And
sun's
pull it in.
rays.
The sun is,
Yeah.
yeah, our star is a huge power source. We are solar powered
Yeah.
beings, right? So people, I believe, get really ill, depressed, mentally ill, everything because they have lost their connection to the earth. Even look at most of your shoes that you wear,
Yeah.
they have non conductive soles. So ever you can't ever pull that in. And we actually, our human bodies require antioxidants and nutrients that we pull through the skin of the feet, which is
Hmm.
very receptive, from the earth. And when you're not doing that, you're completely disconnected. So I tell people, go dig in the dirt, go
Yeah.
dig your toes into the soil. In wintertime, at least get out there and get under the stars so that you can get some
Oh yeah.
sunshine. Even when it's cloudy, you're still getting those rays,
Well,
right?
yeah, even in, there's something that I was talking with someone a few years ago, and I had just bought a brand new deck of Oracle cards. And
Mm-hmm.
in front of the book, it said, to charge these, kind of hold them, think about your intention, and then put them up, put them out underneath the stars. And it was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and they were like, well, we'll have to wait and do this tonight. And I said,
No,
why? The stars
they're
are out
always
all the
there.
time.
They're there
You
all
just
the
can't
time.
see them,
Our star's just more prevalent, so
Right.
you can't see the others. That's a
So,
great point for
you know,
most people. They do never think of that. But to
so
get back to circle back around
yeah,
to the subject of reincarnation, or the idea of many
many
lives,
lives.
yeah, I know for a fact, at least from my perspective and my experience, this is true, and that it's fantastic because when you think about it, we have the ability to tap into any
Mhm.
other experience that we want to if we allow ourselves to get quiet and in the right brainwave state with the right intention. And it's really pretty simple once you learn the formula, but you can get information from any of the other
Mhm.
versions of you
And when you
or
get to
any of your
that point,
teachers.
right? And when you get to that point and you realize, and this may be next level for a lot of people, but when you realize that your guides are just other versions of
Of
you,
you. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that they're giving you information that is going to be best suited for this lifetime,
In
uh,
this moment
in
when you're
this
getting
moment.
it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's amazing. I
And
love, I just love people laugh at me, but one of my favorite two movies, now maybe three, are the Bill and Ted series, Bill and Ted's Great Adventures. Everybody thinks that's, silly, 80s, 90s comedy, airhead comedy. But one of the coolest precepts in those movies is that they travel through time, if you will, or frequencies to meet other versions of themselves.
mhm,
And those versions leave them post-it notes in this life
mhm.
so that they don't get stopped by the cops, for instance, or
Right.
they don't get hit by a falling tree or whatever, I'm making some of that up, but they literally are leaving themselves post-it notes. And so I like that idea of these different versions leaving you post-it notes. When
Mhm.
you're getting an inspiration or you're in meditation and you have a very deep, maybe, connection with what you would call a guide, that's just you on a different
Mhm.
level giving you a post-it note. And it's so cool, And I think that's empowering to know it's you.
Mhm. There's,
Right?
I was going to say that I think a lot of times people get hung up in thinking that it has to be them in the here and now, but that's ego speaking.
It is ego. It is ego. No, plain and simple. So I love that. And some people, some people are truly just really humble, and they say, oh, I could never come up with that kind of information. And I bow
Mhm.
to my guide or my deity or whatever. And that's okay. It's okay. But once you get to a certain level of, I don't want to say enlightenment, because enlightenment never comes.
No,
We're just gaining more,
right. That's what we're
right,
working
wisdom.
towards. Right.
Yeah, but there's no brass ring at the end of the tunnel.
Mhm.
That It's continuously evolving, so we're getting more and more. But once you get to a certain point where you realize everything is connected and everything is actually a part of you and a version of you, you can be really more consciously self-aware and be very particular about your selection of who you want to tune into, and
Mhm.
how you receive that information and how you integrate it and utilize it. And I think that's where the self-responsibility in this life comes in. It's also where the greatest gifts are hidden.
Well, and also I think that, just to kind of iterate on a point that I think is important, is that not the purpose for your existence, for all existences, is to have experiences
Yeah.
and to really learn what it means to be alive.
Yes.
And so even perceived negative experiences have an opportunity for learning and growth. And we,
Sometimes the biggest
right.
opportunities,
So
right?
even if you've had a hard life, let's say you're 45 and you're waiting for that break that you can catch.
Yeah.
Look at, those really hard moments in your life and see,
Hmm.
is there something that I can take from this? Is there
Hmm.
some way that I can learn and grow? Talking about one of the things that I thought about a few months ago is we come into this world, and it's like we're sat on a chair and we look through the window, and through the window is how we perceive life.
Yeah.
And to the left and the right of us, in this kind of room that we're looking through these windows, are other people looking through their own windows.
Hmm.
And generally, it's our parents, our loved ones who raise us up, who say, this is the window that you need to look through.
Right.
And some people go through life and they say, well, I don't want to look through this window. I want to look through that window. And that's fine. But when you get to a certain point, you realize that the whole time there's a door behind you.
Yeah.
And you're not restrained to this
No.
room looking through these windows. You can
No.
leave and find a whole new way of existence.
That's right. And I often say this life is this experience that we're having. It's like the escape room game,
Yeah.
and you're locked in this game with a team of people, i.e., the people you interact with or work with or in love with or whatever. But the whole point of the game is working together to find the clues and put all the clues together so you can get out and realize you were just in a game, right?
Well, and it's not really like it's not a, when you say get out, it's not escaping your life. It's getting out
No.
of your own way.
Yes, getting out of your ego and your mind's
Right.
way. Out of a limited perspective, let's just say,
Right.
right? Which
So,
kind of puts us into another subject that we were
yeah.
going to talk about later, but yeah,
Yeah. So I mean that and
all
that
these things being related.
and that kind of brings us to, I think, the end of this episode. And in the next episode, we're going to talk about that topic we were just kind of hinting at, around the whole idea of life being a simulation. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Please like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to the audio version, please like it and favorite it wherever you're listening to it at. And we'd love to know if you're finding what we're talking about valuable and interesting. So leave a
Yeah.
comment below somewhere.
Yeah. Thank you. And share. Share
Yep.
with your
Share
friends and
it.
have some
Share.
good conversation. Let it be an icebreaker for
Right.
conversation, right?
Exactly. So thank you all so much, and we'll talk to you again next time.